let me just tell you a little bit about how what we're going to talk about tonight came about. Way back in the day, I used to work with congregations that were just beginning. So they were just at the starting point of their becoming a church, a congregation. And we had many discussions about what are the very essential things that are important to get into the DNA of a congregation right at the start, right at the beginning of their becoming, so we don't have to figure it out later. What are the crucial things? So once the pandemic happened, what we began to realize is congregations in many ways needed to go back to the very basics of congregational life. We've talked for years about, about covenant and mission, vision, all of those congregational foundations. But as far as what is the most important things to hold on to, I kind of heard myself saying similar things to what I was saying with these congregations we're just becoming. So instead of talking about the building, the DNA or the building blocks or whatever, I came up with something very Southern. So the Roux of the Unitarian Universalist Gumbo is what I came up with. Those of you who may not be cooks or don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about gumbo is a great big pot of stuff. You can have lots of different things in there. But before you can start adding stuff, you really need to make a good roux, which is the basis. It's just a few ingredients, but if you get the roux just right, it's going to be a good gumbo from then on. So I want to talk to you about the 3 key ingredients for the roux of Unitarian Universalism. The first one that I want to talk about is Unitarian Universalist identity. It is critical that all of our congregations have a sense of who we are as a people. What makes us unique as a faith community? I mean, there are things we like to think we're pretty special and unique. There are many things we have in common with many other religious denominations, actually. But it's really important that we understand who we are as a people. So Unitarian Universalism as an identity is critical for us to understand. The next thing that I think is critical is spiritual depth. And I mean depth. This encompasses a lot of different things. It's not just a course on world religions that we offer once every few years for our adults. I'm talking about faith development for all ages, spiritual deepening with others. So things like covenant groups, small group ministry groups, places where people can connect with other Unitarian Universalists in a deep way that helps them question, struggle with their faith, struggle with their internal spiritualism, and how that intersects with Unitarian Universalism, struggle internally, struggle with others in a loving, supportive way that centers our values so that we can continue to become and become and become yet again. So I'm talking about real spiritual depth, not just some spiritual learnings or understandings. I've mentioned small groups. Small groups is a great way to do a couple of these things. UU identity, if you have a really healthy, striving, well-done small group ministry program, covenant circles, you are living in covenant. That is a huge piece of Unitarian Universalist identity. We are covenantal people. That sets us apart from many other traditions. And in a small group setting, we learn how to actually be covenantal with one another, because in our small groups, a healthy small group program, you have a covenant that you agree to of how you're going to be together as you are in your small group. So you actually get to practice covenantal living, which makes you a stronger Unitarian Universalist because you're actually living the covenant that is so much at the center of our faith. Themed ministry. So if your covenant groups also have a theme to it, one theme might be gratitude. And then if your minister is preaching on that at the same time, that a theme can help people think not only in their small group about it, but on Sunday morning throughout the week, That helps people to go deeper into their spiritual life. I already mentioned you have challenges and comfort in what you do with your small group or in your spiritual deepening group that you might create specifically for this task, whatever program comes out for your spiritual depth. Telling of our stories is a way to have a Unitarian Universalist identity as well. You know, what are our stories? What are Unitarian Universalist stories? What are Unitarian stories? What are Universalist stories? What's the story of this congregation? What was our story at its founding? Why was there a need to be created? What was our story during the civil rights movement? What is our story? And unfortunately, perhaps we will be asking, what was our story when the next war in Israel happened, right? What was our story and what was our part to play in our larger context? So large and local stories. And our liturgy is very important, both for Unitarian Universalist identity and spiritual depth. Having some rituals that we are used to and become part of our community living is very helpful for us to understand who we are as a people. We light our chalice every worship service, perhaps, understanding the story behind the chalice, why we light it, perhaps in your congregation, the significance of that chalice maybe that you are lighting is very important. And our stories during liturgy, the words we say during our worship services, the words we share together at our board meetings, perhaps, the covenants we share together, different things that we say together in community, all help us with our identity. And they also help us with our spiritual depth, because it's not the stories that need to change all the time to keep us entertained, but it is we who look at how we feel about a story as we hear it again and again, because the story may not have changed. It's about how we have changed and how we interact with that story. Makes us wonder who we are today that we weren't the last time we hear the story, and we might wonder who we want to become or the next time we hear the story. Those are some of the pieces of how to get you there. So to make it a little clearer what I'm talking about when I talk about UU identity, our identity as a faith needs to be strong in our communities, and we need to be able to question and struggle and go deep with one another in a loving, comforting yet challenging way in our congregations, so that we can grow as human beings to make our community better, so that we can interact with the larger world in a way that we can have a positive influence on that world. This is a life-changing faith, which brings me to the last piece I want to share about the third ingredient of the Roux, generosity. So we have UU identity, spiritual depth, and generosity. And I don't mean generosity as, are we giving enough? That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, as you make your decisions, values-based decisions in your congregations, it would be wonderful if we all can be asking ourselves the question, and in making this decision, are we being generous with Unitarian Universalism? Are we being generous with Unitarian Universalism? Because I made an assumption from the last slide that I showed you that we're here to change the world. We come together in community to make the world a better place. So if that is one of our core purposes, are we being generous with Unitarian Universalism? Because sometimes the question is, no, I don't think we are. I think we could be more generous. That may seem counterintuitive to a time when so many of us are looking at things from an austerity point of view, but I'm really challenging us to look at it from a generosity point of view. I had a conversation with a leader who was trying to start a congregation in her area. This was within the last year. And most of the conversations said, well, I tried to do this, and instead I only did this. So it was really come from a I'm not enough or it's not enough point of view. And when I really talked to her about generosity, and I said, but isn't it wonderful that you had each other? There may not have been as many people at that meeting as you wanted, but isn't it wonderful that you could connect with each other and talk about Unitarian Universalism? You were being generous with yourselves and with each other and with Unitarian Universalism. So I really believe generosity is one of the keys to help us avoid burnout. Because if we can answer the question, are we being generous with Unitarian Universalism to the best of our ability, given our current circumstances? If the answer is yes, what a good feeling that is. You know, we've all learned that giving feels good. And if we can feel like we're being as generous as we can be, being generous feels good. And it's helpful for people. There's a spiritual component to generosity, but I also really believe that it is a true antidote to burnout of leaders, because if we're constantly striving for something more, something better, something beyond, it sometimes, especially in times of transition or trauma, it can feel very depleting. And just so we're very clear, we have all been through trauma. We have all been through the collective trauma of the pandemic. So we are all experiencing, we're just not quite what we want to be right now. I've talked to many people as I was going into meetings immediately after the lockdown. I kept saying to people that I pre-forgave people before I would go into a meeting, because I knew I was not at my best. So I assumed nobody else was at their best. And so it was very helpful. I took it as a spiritual practice for myself to just pre-forgive people for saying something that I know later they're going to regret, for making mistake, for being late, for not having the document, for whatever. I just pre-forgave everybody so that we could really be more present with one another. And I think we're still in that place. We're still in that place of not feeling quite centered. And that's very typical coming out of a trauma. One of the other things that is very clear to me is people don't retain information very well post-trauma. We don't hear well, we don't remember well. So it's harder to feel generous when we never feel like we're enough. So I think we're collectively in a place of not feeling we're enough, the congregation's enough, the volunteerism isn't enough, the money's not enough, something is not enough. And I'm asking us to take a leap and turn that around and saying, well, we've only got what we've got today, resource-wise. So are we being as generous as we can be today with Unitarian Universalism? Just so you know, when I talk about Unitarian Universalist identity, I just want to be very, very clear that I include as central to Unitarian Universalist identity our theology, our values, and living in covenant. I just want to be explicit about what I'm talking about. It's only 3 ingredients.